Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
So the first reading today is one you could recite with me if I wasn't doing an altered interpretation. To me, it is as challenging as it is simple, and that is Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God? And as Spirit would have it, today's emailed daily Quaker message was written by Margaret Fell, the co-founder of the Religious Society of Friends, in 1654. And she writes, "My dear hearts, be faithful, every one, in your particular measure of God's light, which God hath given you, and on the invisible wait in silence and patience, and in obedience to that which opens to the mystery of God." You may or may not remember or have even been here a while back when I shared with you that I was an undergraduate student for a long time. I started college back in the days when registering for classes meant standing in lines with arms full of registration forms, collecting multiple signatures for each class, one signature at a time. By the time, I'm sure y'all are nodding, so I'm sure that's familiar to you. By the time I graduated college, 20 years later, I didn't graduate cum laude or summa cum laude, I graduated cum laude. By
Eternity
then,
plan.
right. I had my own parking space at Greensboro College. Registration by then was way easier, mostly done by computers, although for some reason that I don't remember, the lines were still part of that. One thing that has yet to change, even today, is one short abbreviation. Whenever a detail about a class was missing and still not known, the letters TBD were in the place where that information should have been. So the letters TBD stand for
To be determined.
to be determined. TBD. Sometimes there wasn't a textbook that was known, so TBD. The column where the instructor's name might go might have TBD. I always like to imagine that the English professors were in their offices drawing straws as to who's going to teach English Lit 101 this semester. It might take up until the day of classes starting for whatever was to be determined to be finally settled. Actually, it was so commonplace that the students grew accustomed to not knowing every single detail ahead of time. From my experience at Guilford College, not as a student, but as part of the faculty, I know firsthand the registrar and the bookstore manager were not happy with all those TBDs all over the semester's course list. When the answers weren't readily available, they had to do the best they could within the scope of their ability and their authority. Then they too would have to wait until the details that were not available were finally settled. Well, as I reflected about this, I realized that TBD isn't just a placeholder on some college course list. There are ample times when all the answers to our questions or the specifics about an issue are just not known yet. TBD is a way to acknowledge that some things are incomplete. The details can't be rushed. They can't be forced, no matter how vital or urgent they may be. I don't know about you, but it seems as though we are living a world that is TBD. Not just as individuals or as a society or even a nation. It feels to me more like the entire human species and planet Earth herself is straining through this era whose future is yet to be determined. Every morning we wake up to the news that would have been a science fiction novel or some dystopian novel just a few years ago. We might learn about artificial intelligence, accelerating global warming, political polarization, economic destabilization, endless wars, miraculous discoveries, and innovative breakthroughs. And that's before we've even finished our morning brew. We're all like that college registrar, doing the best we can do with what we have available to us, knowing full well that important pieces are incomplete. In the midst of the unknown, we naturally want to know what in the world, where is all this going? The honest answer is TBD, to be determined. Now, this is where my trusty, dusty dictionary comes into play. I've told you about that big, thick dictionary Tracy gave me for Christmas 25 years ago. It's more serves as a booster seat in the present moment. But I referred to it this week to explore exactly what does it mean to say to be determined. There are three key definitions to the word determined. The first meaning is to decide or assign specific meaning. Like when a law determines an answer that addresses a specific issue. It settles something once and for all, like the law requiring us to wear seatbelts because it's just not safe to go flying out of a car, right?
No.
So there's a law that determines that's what we have to do. Using that definition in relationship to a future that's to be determined would have us looking outward for some external authority that will decide and define, solidify, and codify the destiny of Earth and all its inhabitants. Well, that's not a very palatable way to view all the possibilities that are yet to be determined. It can feel, though, as if we are being dragged along by outside forces over which we have no say and no control. But I surely have to believe that we are more than just passive spectators watching history happen to us or despite us. A second definition of determined is to discover. An example of this is centuries ago, scientists determined that water consisted of hydrogen and oxygen molecules. And only recently, astronomers have determined that the average distance between the moon and the earth is 239,000 miles. It's still up for determination. From this perspective, something to be determined can be measured or logically assessed to reach some reasonable and verifiable outcome. And to dispute that determination is to consider again and determine again. The third definition of determined, I think, is one that serves better for envisioning a future outcome. This one means to firmly resolve. To be firmly resolved, while life as we know it is turned completely upside down, conveys an unwavering commitment to something that specifically matters most to us. That could be just one facet of one of our values or testimonies. It could be part of a dream or an ideal. What does it look like for us to be firmly resolved, to be determined in this particular and peculiar time and space? The answer to that question is actually rooted in Quaker history. The world, when the Religious Society of Friends got its start, was also topsy-turvy. On the heels of the English Civil War and regional hostilities of the mid-17th century, there was intense political, social, and religious upheaval. People were beginning to resist the control of multiple rigid hierarchies. They always had somebody telling them what they could do or what they could think or believe. Early Friends believed in heeding the voice of Christ within, rather than depending on the church and its authority for spiritual direction and its outward ceremonies for their connection to God. By 1660, 8 years after George Fox's vision on Pendle Hill, there were already 50,000 people who considered themselves children of light and later called themselves friends. By the time of Fox's death, about 30 years later, those numbers had doubled to over 100,000 followers of Quaker practice. The earliest Quaker evangelists were called the Valiant 60. These friends preached and taught that a direct experience of God was available to all and any who would yield themselves to God. Contrary to the dominant belief of the time, class, education, power, privilege, and favor were not required for an intimate and personal connection to the light. I'm going to read that again. Class, education, power, privilege, and favor are not required for an intimate and personal relationship to the light. The gifts of the Valiant 60, if you look them up, are astonishingly diverse. Some preached, others wrote, some traveled across Europe, throughout the world, and to the newly forming British colonies. Some urged legalizing religious freedom. Others engaged in public discourse, while still others cared for prisoners and the needy. History tends to remember rare individuals who are boldly accomplished. And that's true for early Quakers in public ministry. Quakers like George Fox and Margaret Fell, like Edward Burrow and John Cam, Mary Fisher, who walked across Europe, like walked on her feet across Europe to meet with the Sultan of Turkey, and her resultant journal entry about Muslims is beautiful if you want to look it up. George Whitehead, who joined the Valiant 60 as a teenager, spent years lobbying Parliament. 4 friends dared to defy Puritan laws that banned Quakers and were hung for it in Boston. But Quaker history, as is true for so much of all history, has been built on the shoulders of common folks. Friends who counted way more than 60, thousands more than 60, who were just as determined as the Valiant 60. Determined to cook meals, care for children, gather and pray, write letters, raise money. These friends offered the kind of quiet acts of courage that rarely, if ever, make the history books or Ancestry.com. You know as well as I do, the same is true today. The public eye sees those who are in the forefront of our narratives, those who can grab the headlines and snag the sound bites. Meanwhile, in the background, countless individuals are intently committed to using their gifts for small but positive actions. The truth is, we don't have to be a George Fox. We don't have to be Superman and save democracy. We do not have to resolve this issue about AI. We don't even need to know how history itself will unfold. Quite likely, as with friends of old, we are simply called to be determined people. Some of us may be determined to write beautiful prayers that are poems. Some of us might be determined to listen, maybe even to give voice to those who have no voice. We may be determined to speak truth to power on a local level or within a family, while others of us may be determined to protect the earth by promoting recycling or composting. We may be determined to care for our neighbors. All of us ordinary friends and folks are called to be determined, to live faithfully the measure of light we have been given, doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly with the God of our understanding. The future is, indeed, to be determined. May we, too, be determined. And so it is. Amen.